In this reflective practice video today, I'm going to talk to you about the ideas I had and how they've developed into the film you see today, alongside some other methods used by industry professionals that helped me come up with these ideas. Now, believe it or not, coming up with an idea that's original is pretty difficult, and coming up with an idea that's original and good is nigh on impossible. I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to come up with ideas that weren't too ambitious but still challenged me creatively. I found this particularly hard, so I ended up doing some research into how professionals actually come up with their film ideas. After doing some digging, I came across a blog post. It was about a visit that Steven Spielberg had paid to the USC, or School for Cinematic Arts. In it, a student asked a particularly tricky question. As a film director now working in the era of established film and digital technology, do you have any advice for new filmmakers on how to approach originality, especially when everything feels recycled and done before? And well, Spielberg, as if he was expecting this question, responded with the following. He said, "You have to realise that you are original." It's true, a lot of the things you see today are imitations or throwbacks to older movies, but there's only one of you. As long as you manage to put yourself into the film, your personal experiences, goals, feelings, perspectives, there will be originality in that. Include what makes you, you, and your work will sooner or later mould into its own unique expression, no matter how familiar it would be on a conscious level. And I think that's what matters most when it comes to filmmaking, or honestly anything creative in life. Now, admittedly, that's a bit too wordy for my tastes, and honestly, that whole spiel took us quite a few takes to get right. But I just kind of want to go into how I interpreted what Spielberg is saying. Now, when he says you are original and include what makes you, you, I think he means write about what you know, draw inspiration from your personal experiences, and with it, you'll develop a deeper understanding of what you're putting your characters through. There was potential for them to actually just face the death penalty because it would be considered like murder and stuff like that. So you could have, like, just as a general thought process, is like he's shitting himself because what he's done, and like the consequences of it, the repercussions of it, yeah. And since you know or have experienced it, your film will be better off for it. He then goes to talk about how E.T. was drawn from his own childhood experiences, specifically his parents' divorce. Looking back, did I really listen to Spielberg's advice? Absolutely not. I made a war film. I don't know anything about war. Have I experienced war? No. Do I plan to? Absolutely not.
Wait here. No, I'm coming with you. You're waiting here.
However, history is a topic that's particularly interested me, and especially the time of World War I and II. And I wanted to pay respects to those that have fought and died into that war, which is why I did a lot of research into the topic, in order to get an accurate depiction of what it was like back then. But to summarise, I think you should be able to pull inspiration from everyday life, and use your own personal experiences as a starting point to tell your story. Look around you, there's inspiration everywhere, which is one of the reasons I've started carrying around a black notebook. I take it with me wherever I go when I go about my day-to-day, and anytime I get any sort of inspiration or idea or any sort of concept that I think I could turn into an idea, I just jot it down, and then I'll come back to it when I've got time to think about it more. Let's move on from the personal to the practical. Carl Iglesias had an interview where he talked about different ways of generating ideas.
It is actually the bane of the writer's existence, especially the screenwriter, to come up with something new. I mean, when you think about I think in the second edition of the 101 Habits, Bill Marsali, one of the screenwriters there, talks about doing the 20s. So for him, like everything that he thinks about, any event, any scene, character, whatever, he thinks of kind of listing 20 different ways of doing it, because the first 2 or 3 or 5 of them will be cliches, will be things that you're automatically going to think about them because they're the most famous ones, they're the most that we've seen 100 times. But by going deeper, and he forces himself to go deeper, that's where you get the creativity and the originality. And eventually, when you reach that past the 10 or 12, 15, all the way up to 20, you'll start getting some really original ways.
Now, in that interview, Carl touches on a method used by screenwriter Bill Marsali, and it's called doing the 20s. So, what is doing the 20s? Well, it entails a writer looking at 20 different ways to do a particular scenario, or a particular act, or a particular action. So for example, it could be, let's think of 20 different ways to kill someone, 20 different ways for someone to fall in love, things like that. And as you go down the list, the first 5 and 10 will probably be known cliches, and when you get further and further down, the ideas you think of will become more original. I do think this is a strong method for coming up with ideas, but I do think it has its drawbacks. One of which is just because an idea is original doesn't necessarily mean it's good. In my personal opinion, and you might think differently to me, those ideas that we've considered cliché are considered cliché because they've been done before and they actually work. So I think especially when starting out, taking a cliché concept and developing it, adding your own little spin on it, can often be better than coming up with something that has never been done before and is really tried and untested. So I've come up with my 3 ideas, now I need to develop those ideas. Which brings me on to the legend himself, Christopher Nolan. He was also interviewed about the topic of coming up with ideas, but also developing those ideas into something tangible.
I try to be all about story, and then as I'm writing, create visuals or situations that I actually don't know how to do. And I try to take my director's hat off when I'm writing and write things that I then come to as a director and I say, I have no idea how to do this. I have no idea what this will look like, how to visualize it. Because that's when you know you're challenging yourself. And it's through that challenge, you then put together a great team of people, and through that challenge you find something that you haven't done before. You find something fresh and different. And that's really the fun part of filmmaking, that challenge.
What I think Christopher Nolan's trying to say is you'll write a story and not necessarily worry about the how and just focus on the what. You'll then take a step back and go through it with a more fine-tooth comb and look at it more critically on how he would actually pull these things off. This is how he challenges himself with his movies. It's similar to the 6 hats of thinking, except switch hats with mindsets, and he only has 2 of them. The how and the what. So he starts off with the what. Get as much down on the page as you can. Don't worry about budget or anything, just allow your creative freedom to run. And then take a step back and be more critical of what you've written and really refine it. And consider what you can realistically achieve. Personally, I really like the way that Christopher Nolan thinks, because in the past I feel like I've bitten off a little bit more than I can chew with certain projects and been a bit too ambitious, and I've not really considered how much it would actually take to pull a project off. So by applying this method, it allows me to be as creative as I want and ambitious as I want, giving me a lot of creative freedom to not worry about how I was going to pull it off, as that comes at a later stage.
Just open it as I'm walking along.
Yeah, mate, I quite like that.
I can then take a step back and really refine my idea until I have something concise and something that's actually achievable in the given time frame. And also considering the resources I have. And oftentimes I've had to amend the story to fit with those resources. Which is why, looking back now, I think my script changed so many times due to logistical issues like locations, access to actors, props, stuff like that. So let's look at the methods I actually used to come up with my 3 ideas for the idea development module. So as I stated previously, I started bringing a notebook around with me, drawing inspiration from my day-to-day. After that, I would sit down and go through those notes on a video call with a friend, and would just bounce ideas back and forth and really try and develop those ideas.
1200s, man, like Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah, quite an interesting concept though, and it's a child's imagination, you know. A Viking can fight a knight.
There we go.
So there you go.
Because it doesn't have to be.
That
historical.
works. And often try and do the 20s of different ways of trying to achieve that concept. Eventually we had 3 solid concepts that needed developing. And then later on we went through it a bit more critically and tried to really condense it down into a solid idea. By utilising these methods, we'd actually been able to come up with 3 solid ideas for the project proposal. And I found by using them it was really beneficial, and you can really see the difference between me trying to come up with ideas at the start of this, before finding out about these methods, and the ideas I had after using these methods and putting it into practice. That felt a lot more original and a lot more achievable than what I think I would have came up with if I hadn't used them. And with that, I plan on taking these methods into other projects and using them in the future.